Most investments pay you in one or two ways, but real estate pays you in five. If you've ever wondered why so many people build wealth through property, this episode breaks down the five income streams that we can make in real estate and how you can put them to work for you.
Yeah, I think sometimes investors focus on one of two things, right? I think they either flow on cash flow or they focus on appreciation. And I think people that don't invest assume it's all about appreciation and they kind of miss the cash flow piece.
Yeah, and I think cash flow is one way that you can make money when you sleep. So that's actually income stream number one. So let's talk about it, Danille.
Yeah, so what is cash flow? Because I was just telling you before we hopped on that I have a client that I'm working with, and she is very, I think I'm cash flowing a little bit, right? And whenever somebody says that and they don't really know their numbers, I always think they're probably not cash flowing at all.
Yeah, I think so too. And one thing that I wanted to ask you is when you have an investor or even you yourself, do you factor in or question, how do I say this? When you put money down, do you factor a return on your money that you put down?
I don't for myself, but I do for other people. And the reason I don't for myself is because for me, it's a long-term strategy and I'm not going to invest in anything else. Like I don't want to put money into the stock market. I don't feel comfortable putting it into crypto. I'm not going to just leave it in my savings account. So for me, and my strategy is weird too, because I like to pay off my properties. And so, a
lot of people would say, don't do that.
I know they would. And honestly, if I look back through the years, I would have done better if I hadn't. But unlike my husband, I just don't love debt. Like for me, it's more of like a retirement plan. I'm not looking at what I'm making necessarily today, but I'm looking, once these are paid off into my retirement, what is that picture going to look like? But for my clients, it depends as well. So I have some clients that are just like me that just want to put money down. They'll pay cash for a whole property, right? Because they're making good money and they don't know what to do with it. And then I have other clients that are very much like, I'm getting this return in the stock market. How much do I have to put down and what's the return on my money? And if it doesn't make sense, then I don't want to do it. And that's okay too. I actually think they're both really good strategies depending on if you're going to actually invest your money elsewhere or if you're just going to let it sit in a savings account.
I think that's a fair point because that's a question that I often wonder is, do you, calculate your return on that or not? So it's interesting to hear how other people do it. And I like your feedback on that and your thought process behind it.
But I will tell you, so Ken had me do something interesting about a year ago. I have a property that has a 2.8% mortgage and it's a condo. And then I had another property that was almost fully paid off that's a condo. And I was thinking because I have I have more expenses on the one than the other, that the one was a better return. However, if you look at the money that I had invested in the condo that was fully paid off versus the condo that was not paid off, but I had a 2.8% mortgage, my return was way better because I wanted to sell one of those condos. And I was actually leaning towards selling the one that had a mortgage on it. But then when I did calculate how much cash in the, was sitting in the one that was paid off and my return wasn't really that much better, I did realize that that's when for me cash on cash was important because it was like, okay, it actually makes sense to sell the fully paid off one and reinvest that into a property that cash flows better because the return is not as good as on this other one. And so that it surprised me like a lot that the return, because I just didn't have as much money put into the other one, real money. Like I had a loan, but not real money.
Yeah. And I'm not going to lie, after that episode, or I remember you guys talking about that, I did my homework on all my properties and I'm like, figuring out what's my cash on cash return on like everything. And so it was a little bit different because ones that you think, might be better, maybe didn't fare as good using that metric. So it is interesting. Like cash flow is obviously one huge way that real estate pays you, but your cash on cash, return is good to know too.
Well, and I think HOA really affects that. Like I just had a client where her HOA, so her property was worth about $350,000, but her HOA was $850 and she had two $10,000 assessments, one each year of the past 2 years. And I said to her, listen, I know you're cash flowing because it was paid off and the rents were decent in this building. So she was cash flowing, but barely. And I said, but your return's not good. So what she ended up doing was we 1031'd it into a $500,000 patio home with a very low HOA, like $150 a month. And because of that, she now has $150,000 in debt that she did not have before. However, her return on the cash that she has is so much better than it was because of these assessments and this HOA fee. And that's actually where I am with my condo. So I sold the one. I'm going to be listing the other one next year. And the reason is because the HOA fee is affecting my cash flow so much.
Yeah. So then you're looking to trade, like you say, like the same thing she did to a single family home or something with a lesser HOA.
Yeah, exactly. I want to put it into a single family home, actually with no HOA in this area. I'm looking in Phoenix. And once again, I am going to take on a bigger mortgage, but my cash on cash is going to be better because of the no HOA fee.
That's awesome. One thing that I get asked a lot of is the 1% rule really a thing? And so I don't know if that's in your area, if that's a question, but I do get asked that a lot. What's your take?
I don't think so anymore. Like, I think it used to be, but now it's just, it's tough enough to find cash flowing deals, let alone like the 1% rule. What do you think?
Yeah. I'm seeing in my market, like 1% is a good litmus test. Like, quick back of the napkin math. If it's 1% or more, then it maybe warrants further looking into it. If it doesn't meet the 1% rule, it's pretty easy to cross off the list unless there's some hidden thing or something you can change about the property, like adding a bedroom or two, a lot more easily. Like, you don't want to totally write it off, but it is a good, I guess, just throw a dart at the board. If it does meet the 1% rule, it probably merits a little more research.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, with Arizona, well, before we get into appreciation, let's talk about cash flow killers, because I do think the 1% rule relates to Arizona's appreciation, but the cash flow killers are interesting. And the reason that I said that if somebody says they think that they cash flow, but they don't a little bit, the word a little bit, but they don't know their numbers, these things are why I think they don't actually cash flow, because a lot of people don't calculate certain things that will kill your cash flow.
Yeah, I think one of the cash flow killers is vacancy. Yes, if it's rented out 100% or, for the month, you get it. But if you're not factoring in even a couple of weeks of vacancy or, putting into your account little things for major repairs down the road, you have to budget for capital improvements. You have to budget for all of these different expenses that it takes to hold real estate. So if you're not having that in your budget and you're just looking at, okay, this month I made $50, that's not true cash flow.
Right, exactly. And that's really the things that kind of come up that people don't account for. They don't account for vacancy. They don't account for large repairs. They don't account for small repairs. I mean, I had a washing machine go out last month. Okay, that was $600, like, so if you're telling me you barely cash, and that's why you have to really know and understand your numbers. And when people tell me that they're barely cash flowing and they don't have like a full spread of what that looks like, it's kind of off the top of their head what they think, then I just don't think that they are. And I think people get very I think that's why when people buy something that's not cash flowing, and I've done this on one deal, I bought something that did not cash flow, but it was only negative a couple $100, but then rents went down and my HOA went up. So now I'm negative 500, or actually almost 800 a month. However, at least I have the money to cover it, but I will tell you that, when you have to fix things, it sucks pulling it out of your checking account and not your business account because there's no money in there, right? So like I had to re-roll the roof last year. It was $3,000. I had to write a check for that, right? So I think what people do when their cash flow is too tight and they're not cash flowing is when a broken dryer or washer comes up or something and they have to write a check for $600, it really puts a bad taste in their mouth because they didn't account for it.
Yeah. I agree. And it wouldn't be fun to pull out of your personal account. So it's like plan for that. And then you have reserves there as you should for any property. If you acquire a property, you should have reserves.
Exactly. And I really did learn, like, I wouldn't do a negative cash flow deal again. I would do a cash flow tight deal again with all the right components into it, because I do believe over time rents will go up, but I wouldn't do a cash flow negative deal. And Ken always gives me crap about it. I don't regret it. It's actually my favorite property, which is kind of funny. I know you're not supposed to have an emotional connection, but I kind of
I was just going to say
do
that.
to this one, because I just feel like it's a great location. I just need to put some more money down. So right now I'm saving money to put more money down. Rents are actually going up on this, so it won't be quite so negative once this lease renews. But right now it's about 800. I think I can get it to about 500, but it still sucks. It sucks writing checks. It's like taking the $500 hit every month is kind of fine, but it's when you have to pull out of your account more money that it really sucks. And if I were to ever have vacancy on that unit, that would be huge, because now there's no money in that account. So every month I'm writing a check for, $4,000 almost, right?
Yeah. And even though that property has appreciated, unless you're refinancing or something like that, yes, you have the equity in it, but that's why 5 ways real estate pays you. Cash flow is one way, but hopefully some of the other ways make the picture a little bit more brighter. So we can talk about that in
Yep.
Income stream number 2, appreciation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of homeowners have this, right? Because they buy something and their equity is in their home. It's now worth more than they've bought it for. So appreciation is another way that real estate is going to, pay you, right? But you can't bank on appreciation, because appreciation is one of those things that a lot of people, they buy something and they just hope it goes up. And that's not always the case. And even right now, from a couple years ago in Phoenix, we're a little bit softer, right? We're not dramatically softer, but if you bought something 2 years ago and you try to sell it for the same price today, you may or may not be able to, and you might have to come out of pocket a little. And so you shouldn't. This is like I always say appreciation is like the icing on the cake. Like the cash flow is what you're baking with, and the icing on the cake is just the appreciation. If you get it, that's amazing. And if you don't get it, that's okay.
I agree. I think appreciation is like the cherry on top, or like the frosting, like
Yeah.
you said. But it's good to notice, or kind of, it's a longer term. So if you're looking at appreciation, you're not really going to bank on anything, in year 1 or year 2. But if you're looking on a 5 or 10 year horizon, historically, real estate has produced really great returns. So if you factor that into, okay, if I plan to hold this property for 10 years, what might that look like? Even if you project conservatively, you're going to be like, okay, this is great. Now pair that with cash flow and some of the other ways that real estate pays you. Look at the big picture. It's a good thing.
Yeah, and the thing with appreciation is, I agree with you. I think people get lost in you have to be able to afford the month to month, right? Because you have to be able to hold the property for it to appreciate and not get in a bind and have to sell it for a loss. Because that's typically why people sell for a loss. They get in a bind. They can't keep up with the monthly, right? So you have to do that. But then on top of everything else, you really have to be focusing on, holding it for 10 years. So I had a buyer that approached me a few months ago, and she wanted to buy a home, and she was planning on living there for 2 years. And I said, and didn't want to rent it after. And I said, I don't actually think you should buy, because there's a chance you could lose money. And she's like, no, 2 years, but you don't know where you're at in the market cycle. So people freak out when homes go down. A lot of buyers I work with, they're afraid that they're going to buy something and it's going to go down in value. And that can happen, because it can always happen, right? But if you hold something for 10 years, historically, even from 2000 to 2010, and again from 2010 to 2020, all during the Great Recession, home buyers made money. Like if you bought in 2000 and sold in 2010, you were up. If you bought in 2010 and sold in 2020, you were up. But if you bought in 2010 and you sold in 2012, you were down, okay? Or if you bought in 08 and sold in 2010. So you have to be able to hold it. That's why, we don't freak out if the market goes down. Like it's not about the appreciation. It's about the cash flow, right? But I just see buyers sometimes where they're like, yeah, I'm going to hold this for like 3-4 years. And it's like, I mean, that might work out and you might be able to do it. But if you're not willing to hold it for 7 or 10, then you really need to think if you really should be doing it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's a good point that you bring up about, the incremental markets, with holding for 2 years or 5 years versus 10. And I think all markets are different. Talk to your local agent. Some markets see more volatility than others. But at the end of the day, appreciation is a bonus. And if your property or estimated value, you get your tax statement in the mail from the county and your value goes down, don't freak out. Like that's just one person's thought about the value. And if it does go down, do we really care? I mean, if you're living there and or you're renting it out and it's cash flowing and you can afford that payment and it's producing you income every month, then why do you care if the value goes down, a couple $1,000 when at the end of the day your tenant is still paying off your mortgage, or if it's your primary residence and your payment's still really affordable compared to renting somewhere else. It's okay.
Yeah, and it's funny too because so I bought this home that's negative for $600,000, right? And it's probably worth about that. It might be worth slightly more than that. Let's just say 625, right? But it's really worth about the same price. But in the 3 years that I've owned it, you can't forget that I have made, let's do some math. Like 36 grand a year in rent. So I've made almost $100,000 in rent money, and you can't discount that, right? Because it's like it's not just, it might not be cash flowing, but if I would have waited, then that's going to be basically $100,000 less money, and it's not down at all. And even if it was, it's not down $100,000. So you kind of have to bake that in a little bit, that your tenants are paying down your mortgage. It's not just whether or not it's appreciating.
Yeah. And I think that brings us to income stream number 3, which is that loan pay down. I mean, that is a huge piece of the puzzle here, because if you're renting it out, even if you're not cash flowing a lot, that tenant is paying down your loan. Yes, there's interest and stuff, but the longer that you hold something, the bigger the mortgage balance is paid down every month and every year. And that all goes towards your bottom line and goes towards your return.
Yeah, and I think people do forget that, right? And I honestly, the fact that we have this 30-year fixed loan, I don't actually know if we'll have that forever. I really do believe that if inflation keeps up at the rate that it's keeping up, it's not in the bank's best interest, and I don't know, I might be on the outskirts here, conspiracy theorist, but if they do come out with this 50-year mortgage and it does reset every 5 years, you could see a phase out for the banks on the 30-year fixed. I mean, we're one of the only countries that have it. So, I mean, it's not like it's all over and it's common. It's common to us, but it's not common. And so, the fact that your tenants can pay this down and you have this fixed rate and rents are going to go up over time, it's inflation. It doesn't mean they're never going to soften, but they're going to go up. So, I mean, if you have a set payment and the rents are going up over 30 years, I mean, think about what rents were 30 years ago. I mean, I can tell you what rents were 10 years ago, and it was significantly less in this area than it is now. So 30 years ago, I don't even know what they were, but they were super cheap. And so now, that's that person that bought 30 years ago, their payment is the exact same.
Well, even like 5 years ago until now, so you take it and it just grows exponentially. And historically speaking, that's what we've seen. Well, what's happened in the past is usually a good prediction of what happens in the future. Like, yes, we might see market fluctuations, but like you said, looking at longer periods of time, rent isn't going to go down. It might go down or soften from one year to the next, but if you're looking at 5, 10, 20-year increments, take a look at the long term and rents are going to go up. So
absolutely.
Fix that payment. Fix the payment.
Yeah, fix the payment. Well, and then number 4 is really good. And this is kind of a nerdy one, but it's a good one. It's tax advantages. So my brother loves this. He's a CPA. And I bought him Tom Wheelwright's book, about the tax advantages of real estate. And he can't, because he right now is a stock 401k, guy. But he's really starting to look into these. No better
person to read Tom Wheelwright's book than a stock guy. Yeah. Yes, I love it.
A stock guy that's a CPA, so he is, he couldn't believe the tax advantages of real estate because you really, unless you're in it, and honestly, I mean, especially on the CPA side, you really understand it, but there's so much tax benefit to real estate.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of those we've talked about a little bit before, but like the 1031 exchange. So that is one tax code or tax rule that you can take advantage of if you are looking to upgrade a property or swap out a property. But that's just one of many tools in our real estate toolbox. Why it's good to be a real estate professional.
Yeah, absolutely. And you need to, talk to your, CPA, make sure you get a CPA that really understands real estate because a lot of them don't. And
Yeah.
just it's a great additional, especially if you're a high earner.
Yeah.
So let's talk about income stream number 5, and that's inflation protection.
Yeah. So one thing we talk about is, is the government going to continue to print more money? I mean, yeah, they are. They historically have, and I don't think they're going to stop anytime soon. So essentially, when our government does print more money, which it does, or it lends it into existence, then that makes our current debt worth less. So if you are holding debt on a property, it does inflate things, which makes your holdings look better. So
well, and I just looked up because the Fed meets today, so I was just looking up to see if they have announced a decision. They haven't announced anything yet, but I will say that I think it's Jerry, an 87% chance that they're going to cut rates another quarter point. And what the Fed focuses on the economy and inflation. If they keep cutting, they're going to focus on the economy over inflation, which Ken and I always say, of course, right? They're going to do that. But when they focus on the economy and they keep cutting rates, inflation's just going to go up because that's what creates asset bubbles but it also helps the everyday person because you get car loans cheaper, credit card debt's cheaper, businesses can expand, and hire. So there's all these things, right? But it's interesting because they're not going to care about inflation over the next decade. That is not going to be their focus. I can almost guarantee you because they can just print.
Yeah. And I think that that's the thing that we need to focus on. So it'll be interesting to hear. I've been watching too today to see if the Fed has released any news. And we're all patiently waiting. And even if it's a quarter point, which isn't huge in the grand scheme of things, if you're figuring out your mortgage payment, it really does make a difference in I think consumer mentality to be like, oh, the Fed lowered their rates or the Fed raised their rates. So it is interesting to watch just for that regard too.
Well, yeah, and Ken always says that. He's like, why is this going to matter if the Fed lowers it a quarter point? But mortgage applications last week were the busiest they've been since 2023. And this is a slow time of year. I mean, November, December, most people don't buy homes at this time, but they are now because I do believe it's a sentiment. I mean, people are like, I'm going to get in before rates go way down and prices go up and I can refinance. And to your point, it's just the sentiment that they're cutting rates. And I think it'll be even bigger because right now we're at about 6.2, 6.3 on rates. Yeah. If they cut rates a quarter point and we get below 5, in the 5s, I think that's going to spur even more because everyone have been waiting for a 5%. So if it's 5.9, people are, oh my God, this is great. It's that 6 in front of it is creating some hesitancy, but even though it doesn't really save you much money. But I do actually agree with it though, because that's part of the reason I'm trying to get my condo sold and buy a property early next year. Cause I actually do think that the market's going to pick up. I don't know if it's going to go crazy, but I think it's going to pick up.
Yeah, and I think I've been seeing that in my local market is more buyers are entering the market. And in Minnesota in December and November, it's snowy, it's cold, it's icy. Schools got let out early yesterday and we're still seeing an uptick in, buyers. Yeah. It's abnormally busy for this time of year. It's still not June, July busy, our busy season, but it's abnormally busy for our winter months, which is a good thing. And I think that that's a indicator of what we'll be seeing come spring.
Yeah, and it's interesting because our busy season is spring. That's our summer here in the Valley. But this spring was so dead. I mean, we were completely dead until August. During that first rate cut is when people started coming out of the woodwork. And ever since then, it's been picking up. To your point, it's still busy right now, which is very unusual for the holidays. But I do think that it's more of a sentiment than it is, real math. But there's a lot of there's a lot of demand. Buyers are on the sidelines. And so these rate cuts are just bringing them out. It's not like we don't have a demand for buyers. And I know a lot of people think that buyers can't afford the market right now, but that's Not what
Yeah.
I'm seeing on my end. I'm seeing people that can afford it, but they're waiting, and then they're starting to pull off the sidelines.
Well, and then if more buyers are entering the market, which it sounds like you've been seeing that too, then what does that do to asset prices? I mean, it doesn't make them go down. So,
Well, and what's interesting is during the spring, I was seeing so you can't see concessions as if you're looking at Zillow, right? So a lot of buyers don't know this, but on our back end on the MLS, we can see concessions. So we were seeing like 3% up to even sometimes 5% concessions back in like April, May, June. Now, I mean, it's rare for me to have a deal that has concessions. And I actually was just looking for a buyer yesterday because it's the real price. I mean, something can sell for $750, but if there was 2% concessions, it didn't really sell for $750. So you have to calculate that. And I pulled a bunch of deals for him because I was trying to price out a price, and I pulled like 8 deals, no concessions. You wouldn't have seen that. In April, they all had 2, 3, 5% concessions, all of them. And so that is a change. So prices are stabilizing, even though the buyer's not seeing it because they're not seeing the concessions on the back end. At least in my market, that's kind of what, I'm seeing.
I agree. Even though we're in 2 totally different markets, I think our markets are mirroring yours in that regard. There's not as much inspection requests or seller concessions or, different things that make that net sale price go down. We're just not seeing it.
Yep, exactly. And, and I like that we put together, this topic, because I think that when people are looking at real estate, they just really need to be digging into all these different ways you can make money on it. And it really is a long-term investment. And that's what I think you have to wrap your head around, is that, yeah, you might only be cash flowing $300 a month, but what will you be cash flowing in 10 years? And yeah, the appreciation year to year might be lower or very insignificant, but how about in 10 years? How about in 20 years? How about when you retire? What is that going to look like?
Yeah, so I think time is a huge piece of this, and real wealth is built over time through real estate is the vehicle. Short term is great, short-term cash flow is great, but you just add it up incrementally year over year, and you're looking at big things 5, 10, 15 years down the road. So don't just sit on the couch and hope and pray. Actually get out there and take action. And if you need any information, reach out to Danille or I. We both can help you no matter where you're located. It doesn't matter. Just send us and we'd love to talk with you.
Yeah, and our information is below. Thanks, guys, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.